My name is Valentina Sterling, and I will never forget the moment everything changed. The crystal chandelier cast rainbow fragments across the marble floor as I stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching the most expensive wedding of the year unfold before me. 7 figures. That is what this single evening cost. 7 figures that came from my bank account. Though nobody in this glittering crowd knew that devastating secret. Nobody except the bride herself. But as I adjusted the silk of my midnight blue gown and observed the hundreds of guests raising their champagne flutes in celebration, I had no idea that in less than an hour, the groom would humiliate me in front of everyone. And I certainly could not have predicted that his cruelty would backfire in the most spectacular way imaginable. The orchestra played a haunting melody as guests mingled beneath towering arrangements of white roses and baby's breath. Each centerpiece cost more than most people make in a month. The imported Italian marble gleamed under the soft lighting, and the hand-blown glass sculptures caught the light like frozen stars. This was perfection. This was the wedding that would be talked about for decades. And every single detail existed because of me. Let me take you back to where this all began, because the story of tonight's revenge started years ago in a cramped college dormitory room. I was 22 then, sitting cross-legged on my narrow bed with textbooks scattered around me like fallen soldiers. My roommate Paisley burst through the door with tears streaming down her face, clutching her phone against her chest. "Valentina," she sobbed, collapsing onto her own bed. "I think I am going to lose him." Paisley and Kai Richardson had been dating since sophomore year. He was handsome in that effortless way that made other girls stare, with his perfectly styled dark hair and expensive clothes that his family's money could buy. But more than that, he had charm, the kind of magnetic personality that could fill a room and make everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world. Everyone except the people he considered beneath him. I had noticed things about Kai that Paisley seemed to miss. The way he spoke to the dining hall staff. How he treated the cleaning lady in our dorm. The dismissive tone he used with anyone he perceived as having less money or status than him. But Paisley was so desperately in love that she only saw his bright smile and grand romantic gestures. "What happened?" I asked, closing my finance textbook and giving her my full attention. She wiped her nose with a tissue. "His parents are pressuring him about the future. They want him to marry someone from their social circle after graduation. Someone who can contribute to the family legacy." I felt my jaw tighten. "And what does Kai want?" "He wants to marry me," she said fiercely. "He told me so. But his family will cut him off financially if he does not have the wedding they expect. Something grand and expensive that shows their status. And Valentina." Her voice broke. "I cannot afford that. My family barely scraped together enough money to send me to college. If I spend everything I have on a wedding, I will have nothing left to start our life together." I watched my best friend fall apart, and something cold and determined settled in my chest. By then, I was already different from my classmates. While they stressed about student loans and part-time jobs, I had been quietly building something extraordinary. My first business venture launched when I was 19. A small event planning company that catered to wealthy families in the city. But I had a gift for understanding what luxury meant to people with unlimited budgets. Within 3 years, my company had grown into an empire. Not just event planning, but venues, catering, floral design, entertainment booking. I owned a network of businesses that the elite depended on for their most important celebrations. And I had done it all while maintaining a low profile, operating behind the scenes where I could observe human nature in its rawest form. I had money. Serious money. The kind that could fund dreams or destroy them. But more importantly, I understood something about people like Kai Richardson that Paisley did not see yet. I knew that his love for her would always come with conditions. And I suspected that one day, those conditions would reveal his true character. "I have an idea," I told her quietly. "What if the money was not an issue?" Paisley looked up with red, hopeful eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if someone could cover the wedding costs? Quietly. No one would need to know except us." "Valentina, I could not ask you to." "You are not asking. I am offering." I reached over and took her hands. "Paisley, you are my best friend. You believed in me when nobody else did. You supported my business dreams when everyone else thought I was crazy for working instead of partying. Let me do this for you." She stared at me for a long moment. "But it would cost so much." I smiled. "Trust me, I can handle it." That conversation changed everything. Over the following months, as Paisley and Kai planned their dream wedding, I became her silent partner. Every vendor they contacted, every venue they toured, every detail they obsessed over. It all traced back to my businesses or my connections. But I insisted on one condition. It had to remain completely secret. Paisley could take credit for securing the arrangements, but under no circumstances could Kai or his family know that another woman was funding their celebration. I told myself it was about protecting Paisley's pride. But deep down, I wanted to see what would happen when Kai got everything he thought he deserved without realizing it came from someone he would probably consider beneath his notice. I wanted to study him, to understand him, to see who he really was when he thought nobody was watching. Fast forward 3 years to tonight. The wedding that would change all our lives forever. The ceremony itself had been flawless. Paisley looked radiant in her custom-designed gown, a creation that costs more than most people's cars. Kai stood at the altar in his designer tuxedo, smiling with the confidence of a man who believed the universe revolved around him. I watched from the back of the cathedral, dressed elegantly but unremarkably. Just another wedding guest. Invisible. Exactly how I preferred it. But now, at the reception, everything felt different. The ballroom was a masterpiece of luxury and taste. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks from the ceiling. The walls were draped in imported silk, and every surface gleamed with gold accents. Round tables surrounded a marble dance floor, each one set with china that cost more per place setting than most people spent on their entire wedding. 500 guests moved through the space like perfectly choreographed dancers. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, old money families whose names appeared on museum wings and university buildings. This was Kai's world. A realm where status mattered more than substance, where appearances were everything. And I moved through it all like a ghost. I had perfected the art of being present but unnoticed. Dressed well enough to belong, but not so dramatically that I attracted attention. I spoke when spoken to, smiled politely, and observed everything. Which is why I was in the perfect position to witness what happened next. The photographer was organizing group shots near the head table when I found myself inadvertently included. Someone's assistant had gestured for all the guests in the area to step into the frame, and I was swept along with the crowd before I could politely decline. I stood at the edge of the group, planning to slip away as soon as the photo was taken. But as the photographer adjusted his settings, I heard Kai's voice clearly over the general chatter. He was standing with his groomsmen, all of them holding champagne flutes and looking pleased with themselves. His best friend Mason was laughing at something, and Kai's voice carried that particular tone of someone who thought he was being incredibly clever. "Looks like the help got mixed up and wandered into the photo line," Kai said, nodding directly at me with a smirk that made my blood freeze. "Who let the maid out of the kitchen?" The men around him erupted in laughter. Cruel, dismissive laughter that cut through the elegant atmosphere like broken glass. I felt the world slow down around me. The maid. He called me the maid. Me. The woman whose money paid for every flower in his boutonnieres, every note the orchestra played, every crystal glass his guests raised in toast to his happiness. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, fighting to keep my expression neutral as the camera flashed. But inside, something fundamental shifted. All my careful observations of Kai's character suddenly crystallized into perfect, blazing clarity. This was who he really was. Not the charming prince that Paisley had fallen in love with. Not the devoted boyfriend who wrote her love letters. This was Kai Richardson without his mask. A man so consumed with his own superiority that he felt compelled to humiliate a woman he did not even know, simply because he assumed she was beneath him socially. The photographer finished, and the group began to disperse. I started to step back, but Kai was not done. "Seriously," he continued, his voice growing louder and more confident as his audience laughed. "I thought we were clear about keeping the staff out of the guest areas during photos. This is supposed to be an elegant affair, not a charity event." More laughter. More cruel amusement at my expense. But what shattered my heart completely was seeing Paisley across the room, surrounded by her bridesmaids, completely unaware of what her new husband was saying. She was glowing with happiness, adjusting her veil and posing for pictures, lost in the magic of what she believed was the most perfect day of her life. She had no idea that the man she just promised to love forever was publicly humiliating the woman who made their wedding possible. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being invisible. The evening continued with dinner and speeches. I sat at my assigned table, making polite conversation while my mind raced with possibilities. Every few minutes, I caught sight of Kai at the head table, holding court like a king surveying his domain. He had no idea what was coming. After the cake cutting and the first dance, after the toasts and the laughter, the evening reached the moment I had been waiting for. The officiant approached the microphone for the final ceremonial duty of the night. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying across the now quiet ballroom. "Before we conclude this beautiful celebration, we have one final formality to complete. The bride and groom will now sign the official marriage documents." This was standard procedure at high-end weddings. The legal paperwork was handled as part of the reception, often with great ceremony for the guests to witness. Paisley and Kai approached the ornate signing table that had been set up near the head table. The officiant spread out the documents with practiced efficiency, and both of them signed with flourishes, kissing afterward as the crowd applauded. But then the officiant turned to page 2 of the contract. "And now," he continued, consulting his notes, "we need the signature of the financial guarantor of the union." The ballroom fell silent. I could see confusion rippling through the crowd. Murmurs of curiosity as people tried to understand what was happening. Financial guarantor was not a term most wedding guests were familiar with, but Kai knew exactly what it meant. His face went pale as he stared at the officiant. "I am sorry, there must be some mistake," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. "There is no financial guarantor. My family paid for this wedding." The officiant shook his head politely. "I am afraid that is not correct, sir. According to my documentation, all expenses for this event were covered by the financial guarantor, who must countersign the marriage certificate as a legal requirement." I watched Kai's confident expression crumble as the reality of the situation began to penetrate his shock. And then, in the breathless silence of 500 wedding guests, I stood up. The rustle of my silk gown seemed impossibly loud as I walked toward the signing table. My heels clicked against the marble floor in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Every eye in the room followed my movement. Kai's face went from pale to ashen as I approached. His mouth fell open, and the champagne glass in his hand actually began to shake. "What?" he stammered, his voice barely audible. "What is she doing?" I reached the table and accepted the gold pen from the officiant's outstretched hand. The weight of it felt significant in my fingers. "Hello, Kai," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's acoustics. I made sure to speak loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I do not believe we have been properly introduced. My name is Valentina Sterling." I paused, letting that sink in. Several people in the crowd gasped as they recognized my name. In certain circles, Sterling Events was legendary. "You might know me better," I continued, signing my name with careful, deliberate strokes, "as the woman who owns this ballroom, and the catering company, and the florist, and the orchestra." The pen moved across the paper like it was writing destiny itself. "But tonight, you called me something else entirely." I looked up and met his horrified gaze directly. "You called me the maid." The silence in the room was deafening. I straightened up, still holding the pen, and addressed not just Kai but the entire assembled crowd. "It is fascinating, is it not, how a man can stand in a ballroom that exists because of a woman's generosity, surrounded by flowers she paid for, listening to music she arranged, eating food she provided, and still find the arrogance to mock that same woman as beneath his notice." Paisley was staring at me with wide, shocked eyes. But I could see understanding beginning to dawn on her face. All those months of planning, all those miraculous coincidences when vendors agreed to impossible timelines and budgets, all those moments when everything fell perfectly into place. It had all been me. 7 figures, I announced to the crowd, my voice ringing with quiet authority. That is what tonight cost. 7 figures from my personal account because I believed in love. I believed that my best friend deserved the wedding of her dreams, regardless of her family's financial situation. I turned back to Kai, whose face had now gone from ashen to green. But I also wanted to see what kind of man you really were, Kai Richardson. I wanted to understand whether you were worthy of the extraordinary woman you were marrying. The crowd was completely silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving. And tonight you showed me exactly who you are. A man so consumed with his own sense of superiority that he feels compelled to humiliate a woman he has never met, simply because he assumes she must be his servant. I set the pen down on the table with a soft click that echoed through the ballroom. The ironic thing is, you were absolutely right about one thing. Tonight I did serve you. I served you the most expensive, most elaborate, most perfect wedding that money can buy. I served it to you on a silver platter, and you never even knew it. Kai opened his mouth, but no sound came out. But here is what you did not understand. I continued. Service is not the same as servitude. I chose to fund this wedding because I have the power to do so, because I built an empire that gives me the freedom to help the people I care about, because I am not someone who needs to tear others down to feel important. I looked around the ballroom one final time, taking in the faces of 500 guests who would never forget this moment. The woman you called a maid is actually the woman whose signature just made your marriage legally binding. And tomorrow morning, when you wake up trying to figure out how to explain this to your family and friends, remember this. I am not the help. I am the one who decides who gets helped. What followed was chaos. Not the dramatic, explosive kind of chaos you might expect, but something far more devastating. The slow, creeping chaos of a man's entire worldview collapsing in real time. Kai stumbled backward from the signing table, his face cycling through expressions of shock, horror, and dawning comprehension. The guests erupted in whispers, and I could hear fragments of conversation rippling through the crowd. Did she say 7 figures? Sterling Events. That is the company that planned the Morrison wedding last year. She owns half the luxury venues in the city. Poor boy had no idea who he was insulting. But my attention was focused entirely on Paisley. She was standing frozen in her wedding gown, staring at me with tears forming in her eyes. But they were not tears of anger or betrayal. They were something else entirely. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. She walked toward me slowly, her train rustling behind her, until we were standing face to face in front of 500 witnesses. You did this for me, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I did this because I love you, I replied. And because you deserve to marry someone who would treat every person at your wedding with respect, regardless of their position in life. Behind her, Kai was still staring at us in shock. Paisley, he said, his voice cracking. I did not know. You have to understand. I had no idea she was your friend. I thought she was just what? Paisley turned to face her new husband, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked at him without the filter of adoration. Just someone you felt entitled to humiliate, because you assumed she was not important enough to matter? The ballroom was so quiet you could hear champagne bubbles breaking. That is not. I mean, I would never. Kai struggled to find words that could undo what he had revealed about himself. It was just a joke. I did not mean anything by it. A joke. Paisley's voice was getting stronger, clearer. Mocking a woman you have never met is your idea of humor? I watched something beautiful and terrible happen in that moment. I watched my best friend see her husband clearly for the first time. All those little moments over the years, his dismissive comments about service workers, his casual cruelty toward people he considered beneath him, his assumption that money and status made him inherently superior to others. Suddenly she was seeing them all in a new light. Paisley, please, Kai said desperately. You cannot let this ruin our wedding. So what if she paid for it? We can pay her back. My family has money. Your family's money, she interrupted. Not yours. You have spent 3 years talking about what an independent man you are, how you are going to build your own success, and now I find out that even our wedding was only possible because another woman funded it. The crowd was watching this unfold like a tennis match, heads turning back and forth between the bride and groom. But I knew I needed to step back. This moment belonged to Paisley. I am going to leave now, I announced quietly, addressing both of them. This is your wedding night, and despite everything that has happened, I hope you can find a way to talk through this privately. I started to turn away, but Paisley caught my hand. Wait, she said. I need to know something. I paused. All these months of planning, she continued. All those amazing deals we got, all those vendors who went above and beyond for us. That was all you, was not it? I nodded. And you never told me because? Because I wanted you to feel proud of what you had accomplished. And because I wanted to see what kind of man Kai really was when he thought nobody important was watching. She squeezed my hand tighter. What you did tonight, standing up to him like that. I could never have been that brave. Yes, you could have, I said firmly. And someday, when you are ready, you will be. I left the ballroom that night, but the story was far from over. Within hours, videos of the confrontation had spread across social media. Someone had been recording when I signed the marriage certificate, and the footage of my revelation went viral overnight. The headlines were brutal. Groom humiliates wedding investor, gets exposed on social media. Mystery millionaire reveals she funded wedding after being called the Maid. Sterling Events CEO destroys arrogant groom in viral wedding video. My phone rang nonstop for days. Interview requests, business propositions, people wanting to hear my side of the story. But I declined them all. I had said what I needed to say in that ballroom. The real drama was happening in private. Paisley called me 3 days after the wedding, her voice small and tired. I am staying at my sister's house, she said without preamble. I cannot go home right now. I cannot face Kai right now. What happened after I left? I asked gently. He spent the entire night trying to convince me that what he said did not matter, that it was just wedding stress, that he would never normally treat someone that way. But Valentina. Her voice broke. I kept thinking about all the times I have seen him be dismissive to people, all the little comments he makes, all the ways he talks about people he thinks are beneath him. I waited, letting her process. And then I realized something terrible, she continued. I realized that he has probably been making those same kinds of comments about me behind my back. About my family. About where I came from. About how he was doing me a favor by marrying someone from my background. My heart ached for her. Paisley. No, let me finish. I need to say this. She took a shaky breath. I have spent 3 years making excuses for him. Telling myself that his arrogance was just confidence, that his cruel comments were just humor I did not understand. But what you did that night, it showed me who he really is. And it showed me who I have been pretending not to see. What are you going to do? I do not know yet. But I cannot go back to him. Not now. Maybe not ever. We talked for 2 hours that night. About college, about dreams, about the women we had become, and the women we still wanted to be. By the end of the conversation, Paisley sounded stronger. There is one more thing, she said before we hung up. I want to pay you back. For the wedding. I do not have the money right now, but I will find a way. Absolutely not, I interrupted. That money was a gift. It was an investment in my best friend's happiness. And if that marriage is not going to make you happy, then I am glad I spent it to help you figure that out. She was quiet for a long moment. I love you, Valentina Sterling. I love you too, Paisley Chen. 6 months later, I received a call that changed everything again. Valentina? Paisley's voice was brighter than I had heard it in years. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Always, I said. Would you be willing to plan another wedding? My heart sank. Paisley, if you are thinking about going back to Kai. No, she laughed, a sound like music. God, no. The divorce was finalized last month. I am talking about a different wedding entirely. I sat up straighter. What do you mean? I mean, I met someone. Someone incredible. Someone who treats every person he meets with kindness and respect. Someone who, when I told him the story of our wedding disaster, said that he could not wait to meet the friend who was brave enough to stand up for me like that. I felt tears prick my eyes. Paisley. His name is River Martinez. He is a teacher. He volunteers at a homeless shelter on weekends. He has never once made a dismissive comment about anyone, regardless of their job or their background or their circumstances. And Valentina, he makes me laugh. Really, genuinely laugh, in a way I had forgotten was possible. When do I get to meet him? Actually, that is the other thing I wanted to ask you. We are having dinner this Friday, and I was hoping. Would you join us? Not as the silent partner this time. As my best friend. As the woman whose courage taught me that I deserve better than settling for someone who does not see my worth. That Friday dinner turned into one of the most wonderful evenings of my life. River Martinez was everything Paisley had described and more. He was kind, funny, intelligent, and completely smitten with my best friend. But more than that, he was genuinely interested in other people. He asked thoughtful questions, listened to the answers, and treated everyone around him, from our server to the valet parking attendant, with the same courtesy and respect. During dessert, he turned to me with a serious expression. Paisley told me what you did at her first wedding, he said. How you stood up to someone who was treating you badly, even though it meant exposing yourself in front of all those people. I felt my cheeks warm. I just could not let him get away with it. It was more than that, he said firmly. It was brave. And it was right. And I want you to know that any friend of Paisley's who has that kind of courage and loyalty is someone I would be honored to know. 6 months after that dinner, I found myself planning another wedding for Paisley Chin. But this time everything was different. This time, she insisted on paying for it herself. She had started her own business, a consulting firm that helped small companies develop more inclusive workplace cultures. And while she could not afford anything as extravagant as her first wedding, she was determined to fund her own celebration. I want to do this right, she told me as we toured potential venues. I want to marry River because I choose to, not because someone else made it possible. I want to walk down the aisle knowing that every decision we made was ours. But I had other ideas. The wedding was beautiful in its simplicity. 50 guests instead of 500. A garden ceremony instead of a cathedral. Local flowers instead of imported arrangements. A string quartet instead of a full orchestra. And it was perfect. But during the reception, I stood up to make a toast. 2 years ago, I said, addressing the intimate gathering of family and friends, I had the privilege of witnessing Paisley learn one of life's most important lessons. I watched her discover that true love is not about grand gestures or expensive celebrations. It is about finding someone who sees your worth and treats you with the respect you deserve. I looked at River, who was holding Paisley's hand and smiling at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. River, I continued, when you married Paisley today, you did not just gain a wife. You gained a woman whose loyalty runs deeper than oceans, whose strength has been tested by fire, and whose capacity for love is matched only by her wisdom. I raised my glass. And Paisley, you gained a partner who will never make you question your worth, who will never treat other people as beneath him, who will stand beside you as an equal in all things. The crowd raised their glasses, but I was not finished. There is one more thing, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out an envelope. River, you mentioned during dinner planning that you wished you could afford to take Paisley on a proper honeymoon. Somewhere special where you could celebrate the beginning of your life together. I handed him the envelope. 2 weeks in Tuscany. All expenses paid. Not as an investor this time, but as a friend who believes that true love deserves to be celebrated properly. Paisley started crying before he even opened the envelope. River looked stunned. Valentina, Paisley whispered. You cannot keep doing this. You cannot keep paying for my happiness. I am not paying for your happiness, I corrected her. I am celebrating it. There is a difference. And there was. 5 years have passed since that first disastrous wedding, and my life has changed in ways I never could have imagined. The viral video of my confrontation with Kai opened doors I never expected. Business leaders began reaching out, wanting to work with the woman who had shown such grace under pressure. My event planning empire expanded into corporate consulting, helping companies create more respectful workplace cultures. I started speaking at conferences about leadership and dignity, about the power of standing up for yourself and others, about the importance of treating every person with respect, regardless of their position in your perceived hierarchy. But the most important change was personal. Paisley and River have been married for 3 years now, and they are expecting their first child. I am going to be the baby's godmother, a role I take more seriously than any business contract I have ever signed. And Kai Richardson? I heard through mutual friends that his family was less than pleased when the story of his behavior went public. Apparently, public humiliation of service workers does not align well with their carefully cultivated philanthropic image. His trust fund was significantly reduced, and he was forced to get an actual job for the first time in his life. I wish I could say I felt sorry for him, but I do not. Actions have consequences, and his actions revealed a character that deserved exactly the consequences he received. But this story is not really about revenge, even though that is how it began. It is about friendship, about loyalty, about the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it costs you something. It is about understanding that true power is not the ability to tear others down, but the ability to lift them up. Most importantly, it is about recognizing that the people we dismiss as unimportant, the servers, the cleaning staff, the assistants, the workers who make our comfortable lives possible, are human beings who deserve our respect and consideration. I learned that lesson long before that wedding night. But Kai Richardson learned it in front of 500 people, with cameras recording every moment of his education. And sometimes, that is exactly what it takes. Sometimes, the only way to teach someone about respect is to show them what happens when they lose yours. Sometimes, the only way to reveal someone's true character is to put them in a position where they think nobody important is watching. And sometimes, the woman you call the maid turns out to be the woman whose signature determines whether your marriage is legally binding. I am Valentina Sterling. And that is how I learned that the most powerful revenge is simply letting someone reveal who they really are. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of people who got exactly what they deserved. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads, and let us know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone get their comeuppance in spectacular fashion? We love reading your stories.